Good morning, Rod. How are you, my man?
Good morning, guys. Good morning, Rover.
So you like Rod Roddenberry instead of Gene Roddenberry Jr. Why is that?
Well, I never went by Gene Roddenberry. Eugene was my name, but I was called Rod my entire life.
Okay.
It was actually my father's nickname in World War II.
Yeah, so. He was, what did he do in World War II? I know he was in the war.
He was a pilot. He flew something like 80 missions over Guadalcanal and Solomon Islands. Bomber pilot.
I also know he was a police officer for a while.
LAPD,
for a few years. And then how did he start writing stuff?
Well, it's a very interesting story, and I can only tell you what I've heard from many other people. He was writing there, and there's shows like Dragnet out and a lot of other cop dramas that were going on at the time. And he started to sell his stories to those writers. Because that's what they were doing. They were coming to the cops and saying, hey, tell us some interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. Then he would see the show, and he said, I can do better than that. And so he started writing stories, and it paid a whole lot more than he was getting paid on the force.
Of course.
So he got into that, and he started to realize that he could share his perspective of the world because he'd seen so much through his stories.
I heard a rumor once that he was a motorcycle cop? He was. I heard a rumor that he wanted to sell a script or something, and he either pulled over an executive or did something.
I've heard all of those. I'm sure there's truths to all of those. There's one that I heard where he was doing his job as a cop. He was going in for a pitch, so during his lunch break, he took off his uniform and he put on a jacket, and he went into the executives, and he was leaning over the desk, and he was pitching them the story and realized they were all gazing at him just very intently, not saying a word, which is very unusual for executives. Mm-hmm. And then he realized that his sidearm was still holstered here, and they could see it through his jacket. So that's one of the stories that I heard. So they didn't know he was a cop.
That'll get your show picked up, won't it? Yeah, hey, I'll shoot your ass if you don't pick this up. What was your relationship? Of course, for anyone who's not a Star Trek fan, Gene Roddenberry is the guy who created Star Trek, wrote it. I don't know how many of the original series scripts that he wrote, but I'm sure he was involved in all. Yeah,
executive producer of the original series. He wrote a number of scripts, but there were actually many other writers who wrote them. He really just sort of shaped the show, and if necessary, rewrote a lot of them to fit his vision.
So, what year were you born?
74.
So this would have been after the run of the original television series,
yes, right? That was 66 to 69. 3 seasons, was canceled, considered a flop. Went into syndication through the 70s. I was born in 74, had no understanding or care whatsoever of the show. Knight Rider was my show.
Of course, yeah. I'm your age, Knight Rider, Dukes of Hazzard, all of that. A-Team.
Yeah, then I heard stories about the show which touched lives and really affected people in a positive way, and it was Star Trek. And I said, what the hell is this? I didn't know my father did that. And not to give you my life story, but he passed away when I was 17. And it was sort of at that time that I started to hear a lot of these stories and became very proud and impressed with what Star Trek was and started to really pay attention.
So you really didn't know what your father did or anything about, I mean, you must have known.
I knew what he did. I didn't care.
Yeah,
Star Trek was more of an intellectual show, and at that time, it was old. It was like almost a black and white show to me. Every time looking at it, just looked campy and bad.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't into that.
Now the movies started coming out in what year?
79 was the motion picture.
All right, so you were still a young kid.
Yeah.
And then the movies continued after that. So to you, it didn't have any real great effect. I would think that if your father was like in charge of Star Trek and stuff, that you would take at least a little bit of an interest in it.
I don't know what to say about that.
You were smoking a lot of weed, basically, is what you were doing as a kid.
Didn't do too much of that, but I was interested in other things. I think girls were my drug at that time. So, but no, and Next Generation came out in 87. Yeah. And he actually got me a job working on the set, which people would die for as a PA. I was 13 at the time, and I hated it. All my friends were having fun during the summer, and I was a spoiled little brat who my father made me work there, and I had no appreciation for it whatsoever.
So he made you go to this, and he probably thought, I'm going to teach Rod work ethic. He's going to get maybe some interest in the family business, and you just thought, this is stupid. I hate this.
I did have fun, but I was very reluctant because at 13, I really just wanted to go out and have a good time.
Yeah.
So,
do the fans of Star Trek, they are maniacal, fanatical.
They can be.
What do they ask you most about?
I really haven't had any negative stories. I don't get the ones that come up and say, hey, in episode 34, when Kirk said this, what was, that doesn't happen. A lot of them ask, obviously, what was my father like at home? Who was the man behind the myth, so to speak? And that was a question I sort of had for myself. He passed away when I was 17. I knew him, obviously, for those years, but I was a very rebellious teenager and never really took the time to appreciate who the man was. So I ended up doing a documentary where I went exploring my father, and I spoke to friends, family, fans, and other luminaries in the industry, and I said, what is this Star Trek thing, and who is this Gene Roddenberry guy? And it was really fascinating, incredibly eye-opening, and just gained tremendous respect. And it wasn't about putting my father up on a pedestal. It was actually, to some degree, about taking him down off that pedestal, because I spent my entire life, fans always say he's a visionary, he's a genius. And, it's hard to connect with someone like that, whether it's a father or just a father figure. Mm-hmm. And what I really needed to do is find the man behind the myth. So I wanted the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I got a lot of that, which was fantastic. And it actually helped me connect to him a bit more.
Why were you so rebellious as a teen?
It's a damn good question. It's a really good question. I don't know the reason behind it. I wanted to do what I wanted to do.
Well, I'll tell you, because what most people would think is, I obviously don't know, but one would assume your dad is Gene Roddenberry. You guys, he's as the whole Star Trek universe, you guys are rolling in the dough when you're a kid.
So Star Trek came out in 1966, went off the air in 1969. My father did not receive a check from the studio until 1982, until he sued the studio and went after and said, we want to look at the books. And once they started looking at the books, they found that there was money. Not a ton, but there was. It really didn't happen until after Next Generation. So I certainly didn't grow up in squalor, but I didn't live the life that you see on TV with all these children of wealthy.
You weren't driving a Ferrari,
no.
Basically? That wasn't your first car?
I had a Jeep Wagoneer with wood paneling. Great car. Don't get me wrong. Very happy with it. But I did not have a Ferrari.
When the Next Generation came out, did the family's lifestyle change? Because now I'm assuming he's more savvy businessman and more money flowing into things. Did your lifestyle change significantly?
I didn't notice. We lived in a very nice house that I was born in, and then we moved to a very nice house in a very prominent neighborhood, which for me was just stuffy old white people. Mm-hmm. But I didn't notice. I went to school. I had my friends. My life, as a teenager, had very little to do about Star Trek. I had a few friends who were fans, and we became close friends, but otherwise my friends could give a, what.
I'm surprised kids didn't make fun of you for, this stuff about Star Trek.
Yeah, no.
I get made fun of every day on this show if I bring up Star Trek. I actually bought Star Trek memorabilia at auction, so people, they love to make fun of my Commander Riker uniform that I purchased.
I had Star Wars cakes as a kid, and I've got some great photos in the documentary showing me blowing out candles on a Star Wars cake and my father sort of looking over.
Those are the two big science fiction outer space shows, Star Wars and Star Trek. Was there any, obviously Lucas and your father, I'm sure probably didn't hate each other, but was there any sort of rivalry about those two universes?
See, I don't know that. I know they did meet once at a convention, but they weren't close friends, and I don't think they were enemies. And I don't think so. I'm really not here to promote this. I'm here to give this documentary to you as a gift. But
well, thank you.
Yes, but there's a couple of great sequences in there. One where we show a clip of my father, and he's talking about Star Wars, and he's talking about the differences between the two, and how distinct they are, and how they both, have a great world and a great following. And we also interviewed George Lucas, who said many great things about Star Trek. I mean, he was such a great guy. He said Star Wars stood on the shoulders of Star Trek. He said just some very, very beautiful things, and was very respectful and seemed very genuine saying all that, and just seemed to have nothing but respect for Star Trek and my father.
So your dad didn't want to strangle you when you had a Star Wars cake going, son, you son of a bitch.
I think he wanted to strangle me for many other reasons. Many other reasons.
Sounds like you were a pretty bad kid. What was the worst thing? When I was a kid, I was 14 years old. I had a single mother. I would disengage the garage door. I would push the garage door up, push her car out, and I would roll around with my friends, 14 years old, no license, go and buy beer with a fake ID and start drinking in the middle of a park. I was a bad kid, too. What was the worst thing you did when you were a kid?
I wasn't that bad. I mean, in the realm that
makes
I
me
lived
feel like
in,
a real loser.
Yeah, in the realm that I lived in, I didn't get into drugs. I did have parties, and I had my share of alcohol and all that stuff, but never got pulled over, never did drunk driving or anything like that. I did love driving fast. I did steal my mother's Mercedes. I did catch a little bit of air with it and broke the fan belt or broke something in the fan and parked it in the garage, and she never found out, which was crazy. I have no idea what happened, but things like that. But I think just in my version, in my world, they were quote unquote bad things.
Did you ever find out, and by the way, Rod Roddenberry will be at the Cleveland Concoction, which is today through Sunday at the the Sheraton Airport Hotel, 5300 Riverside Drive, clevelandconcoction.org. I have no idea what the hell that is. What is that exactly?
Yeah, if I can say, I met these guys literally over a decade ago. It's two different groups at least, but one of them is called Barfleet, which is, for those of you who know Star Trek, Starfleet. It's a little play on words. And they are a fantastic group who got together with some people who put on conventions. This is their first one. And it's run by the fans for the fans. It's not one of these conventions where it's about selling autographs and selling merchandise. And it's not just Star Trek. It's sci-fi, it's fantasy, it's everything. And it's really just about having fun and letting loose and letting go.
What is
not
Barfleet? I'm not familiar with Barfleet.
Well, as the name might suggest, they are known for having very nice themed parties in the evening sometimes.
Drinking.
There might be some drinking.
Romulan ale, of course.
There might be a little bit of drinking. There might be some themed drinks like that.
Oh, yeah?
But the idea is just to be comfortable, just to have fun, just to let loose. There's no judgment. Wear a costume, don't wear a costume. Anything goes.
Did you ever ask, like, one of the things that is interesting, and which is weird because you as a kid or later as an adult, most people don't know all the ins and outs of their father and mother and their love life and that sort of stuff. But you, of course, have come across these stories.
Yeah,
I mean, your father met your mother on the show, correct?
Yes, she was going to be cast for it. Yeah.
So she was. Your mother is Nurse Chapel, right?
Yes.
How do you pronounce her name?
Majel Barrett Roddenberry.
Majel Barrett Roddenberry. And so if you're a Star Trek fan, she was Nurse Chapel in the original.
Computer voice?
She was the computer voice in The Next Generation. She was a character in The Next Generation.
I think she was actually the computer voice, not to correct you here, in every single incarnation, or her voice was in every incarnation of Star Trek. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. And she was even in the original pilot, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, The Cage.
So
she was second in command. In 1964 or 5, a female second in command.
Which was extraordinary.
At that time.
I mean, there were a lot of stuff that people don't realize about that show, like the first interracial kiss, that sort of stuff. Even having like a black woman
in a position of power. Yeah.
Right, which that was
Russian on the bridge. I mean, Japanese, the whole thing at that time, for some, was, very questionable.
Yeah. So did he know your mother prior to like her first that first pilot thing, or did they know each other? Is that how she got the job in the first pilot?
I would assume they knew each other before. I know they dated for at least 10 years.
Okay.
Before they got married, and they got married in '69.
And then your father, I know, had an affair with Nichelle Nichols, who was Uhura in the show.
My father was a promiscuous individual, and I don't know the facts. I know that, again, in the documentary, I kind of explored a little bit of that. I knew it was there, but I chose really not to go into too much detail and find out. I don't need to know who it was and when it was. That's great. I've spoken to my mother about it when she was alive, and we had a heart to heart.
I mean, when you talked, obviously, like, this is what I'm saying is it's different because anyone, I mean, Dieter, your dad could be having an affair and you wouldn't know about it. Right. You wouldn't know if he had an affair 10, 20 years ago or whatever, but you, of course, know about this kind of stuff. How do you have a conversation? Your mother has since passed away, but how would you have a conversation about this kind of stuff with your mother?
Well, I can't. I'll rephrase what I said before. We didn't have an in-depth conversation. I knew it. She knew it. At a very young age, I actually confronted my father on it because my mother, I saw her crying and didn't know why and kind of pieced things together. And I don't even remember that really, but it was a very awkward time. But I knew that my mother loved him unconditionally. I mean, after he passed away, she went on to carry on the franchise in his name and did everything she could to keep the spirit alive.
Did that give you any animosity as you're a kid? Did that give you animosity at the time to your father because you knew all you knew was that he was hurting your mother?
At the time, yeah, I was definitely upset with him because it was hurting my mother. Yeah, at the time, certainly.
But now as an adult, you go, oh, guys
it's a big
will be
picture
guys.
thing now. Yeah. Well, no, it's not. I want to say I forgive him for that. It's a big picture sort of thing. And like I said before, he was put up on such a high pedestal. Finding out these stories kind of balanced him. It humanized him and brought him out. And again, it allowed me to connect with him more and in many ways love him more.
Do you think that he loved you said that your mother loved him unconditionally. Do you think he had that same connection to your mother? She was the one for him?
Absolutely. No, yeah. Absolutely. But, he also enjoyed the female form. He enjoyed the female body and the female mind.
I could tell by that show because there were naked green women all over it.
That's right.
He loved that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So he was really... he was instrumental in shaping almost every aspect of that show, you would say.
I don't like taking credit away. There were a lot of people, and I'm not just being political here. There was Matt Jeffries, who did a lot of the design of the Enterprise inside and out. I mean, there were a lot of people who contributed to make Star Trek what it was. I think the ethics, the idea, the humanity being in a better place, I would say that came from him. Now, where that came from was his life experience and the books he read. So
when they rebooted the franchise and the J.J. Abrams made the new, I guess there's been 2 new movies, right?
Yep. Wait, you're a fan and you don't know there's 2? I'm just
no. I guess I've seen both of them, and they were okay.
So you liked the first one?
Yeah, I thought it was all right. The stupid lens flares will drive you crazy. Enough of that already. But when you guys, do they have to? Well, I don't know. I guess Paramount or whoever owns that, they could do whatever the hell they want, I guess. They don't have to get your permission or anyone's.
Yeah, the misconception is that the Rodenberry still owns Star Trek and have control over Star Trek. And I guess now some people think I do. Just like any show in Hollywood these days, you sell it to the studio doing it. You give it up. You retain certain rights. But unfortunately, when you pass away, those rights die with you. And as with my father, those rights died with him. So CBS, Paramount, they own 100% of Star Trek.
Do you still get any royalties
Sure.
from that? So his estate gets a
Sure.
certain percentage or whatever. Or
Absolutely. The estate does, but in terms of any sort of creative input, I've got to say JJ's team and Alex Kurtzman and Orsi, the writers on the shows, on the last movies, they have been phenomenal. They have said, our door is open, anything, anytime. They're just great guys.
And when you saw it, well, did they let you see it in advance?
No. Orsi and Kurtzman have been very kind and generous, and I don't think I can say what they've done just because I don't want to get them in trouble now that I'm telling everyone on the air. They may have let me get some advance understanding of 1 or 2 of them, but they have been awesome. I do not get to see screenings way far in advance. I just go to the main screening.
And what did you think when you saw it? Did you like the new version?
I do. I'm very, I don't want to say forgiving. I'm very accepting of Star Trek. All the Star Trek series. They may not be what I would do. I don't think they're necessarily what my father would do. But as long as they don't bastardize the entire thing, Star Trek is about this better humanity. As long as there's ethics, there's some morals, or some meanings, something that explores the human consciousness and the good and bad of us. As long as that's in there, I'm relatively happy.
Do you then have to, like, for instance, Rod Rodenberry will be at the Cleveland Concoction today through Sunday at the Sheridan Airport Hotel, 5300 Riverside Drive, clevelandconcoction.org. Now,
can I quickly say that anyone out there who's a fan and is kind of scared of conventions, they think there's just a bunch of weird people running around. It's not like that. This is just a fun place to go. And like I said before, you don't have to wear a costume. You just go with like-minded people.
You should just hire a bunch of hot chicks to come to this thing, and all the dorky dudes will show up looking at for them, you know?
Get the girls from Roverfest. I've been watching that video in the waiting room. And hey, ladies from Roverfest.
Yeah, whip out your photon torpedoes for us.
Yes, come on down, please.
Now, obviously, you get paid to do this, but I would think that you would just have. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. I would think that there's just a massive pile of cash that you're sitting on. You don't have to go anywhere or do anything. I would think. Am I wrong about that?
Yes and no. I really admire the philosophy that my father put into Star Trek. I mean, I really fell in love. I am a fan of that idea. I'm a believer that we will learn from our mistakes and become a better species. I think we have a long ways to go, but I'm very optimistic. So I want to carry on that in the Roddenberry name. We do not have control of Star Trek, and I'm fine with that. It's really, for me, the Roddenberry name that carries that message. And there's a diehard group of fans out there that know that. In fact, they're the ones who kept Star Trek on the air when it was canceled every single time. So I enjoy doing this.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something I go to do as a job. In particular, this group here. A year and a half ago, they asked me to do this, and I said, absolutely. And while I do get paid, I don't get paid much at all. And I'm not saying that because I wish I did. I love these guys. I've known them for a while. This is tons of fun.
Who, because I'm fascinated by this, there's obviously Star Trek makes a huge amount of money. The estate gets money. Are there a bunch of different kids, or how does this, is this going to all sorts of different sources, or where does this all go? Is there a foundation? Is there this? Is there that? A trust? I don't know. How does this work?
Well, I don't know exactly what you're asking, but I know, all the actors, Shatner, Nimoy, all those guys, everyone gets points. Everyone gets a piece of the action. Mm-hmm. So yes, money goes to a lot of different people.
What about the Roddenberry family? Does it, or his portion of it?
Pretty much just us. Just me at this point.
Okay. What was your father's relationship with the people who have become so famous from this, like Shatner and whatnot? What was his relationship with these guys?
It's a majority of them. There's a lot of respect, love, but there's some others where there's some animosity and some disagreements at the time, and
Like with who? Shatner we all know was
Shatner and Nimoy.
Could be a real dick,
Well, there was some contention between them, and I don't know the stories necessarily, and I've just sort of stayed away from that because I don't want to be. I'm not here to defend my father.
Was it about creative stuff with the show, or other stuff?
It usually has to do with money.
Yeah,
it usually has to do with money. So I pretty much stay out of that.
And even Nimoy too was there was some contention there with him, huh?
Yeah, no, and I don't
never hear anything bad about him really. Like William Shatner, you hear all sorts of weird things about that guy, but Nimoy, you don't hear anything bad about him.
No, and again, I don't dig into it. There's a number of the cast I'm friendly with. I know we have lunch every now and then, mm-hmm. and others I just don't see. I just don't want to get into it. I've got my own life.
Those guys, that must be weird. You can put yourself in those guys' shoes where they're like stuck to that role forever. Obviously they like it, I guess. But William Shatner, he can do a million other things. He's still Captain Kirk.
Right, and you get typecast. And I think there was some animosity about that. Not necessarily directed towards my father, but, they had this 3 years of Star Trek, went into syndication, became very popular, and they were known as Spock and Kirk. And I think in some ways it was hard for them to get jobs.
Yeah. What did you? So you worked as a production assistant on The Next Generation. You didn't really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. I made it fun, but I didn't take advantage of it. I didn't learn from it.
What do you do? What did you do with yourself after that when you became an adult? Did you ever find what you wanted to do?
I have a number of projects. In fact, I'm shooting a short film. I'm not a fan of traditional Hollywood. The way that it's been done, the way the big business, the big corporations, the big studios, I'm just not cut out for it. Mm-hmm. I don't have the spine for it. I've had a little bit of experience where I've gone in there and all this stuff you hear about where someone says something to your face and 5 minutes later says the exact opposite to someone else.
It's all true?
I've had that experience. I can't say everyone in Hollywood, but you have to weed through that to get to the good people, and I'm just too damn lazy to do that. So I love smaller, independent things. They won't make a lot of money. They won't be seen by everyone, but you retain creative control. You can pick who you work with. You enjoy it. And too many of these experiences that people have done, they're just not enjoying what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very fortunate where I can make that decision. So we're doing a short film literally Monday through Friday when I get back. It's a great little sci-fi piece. I'm very excited about it. And the journey so far has been nothing but pleasant.
Did you find out anything about your father either when you made that documentary that you did,
mm-hmm.
or just later in life? Did you find out anything about him that really surprised you?
It's a really good question. I mean, that's a really good question. I had heard a lot of the stories before. I mean, man, there are little pieces here and there. I'm trying to pull out something that might that might be of interest. Places that he lived in L.A., being an officer. He crashed. He was in 2 airplane crashes. People know of one in the Syrian desert as a commercial pilot. He wasn't actually piloting the flight. He was deadheading on it,
mm-hmm.
but it lost an engine and went down in the Syrian desert. And I can't remember the numbers. Something like 7 or 9 out of 22 people lived, and the rest died. And he helped.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he helped get a lot of people out of the plane. He was injured. And then he had to hike across the desert to find some locals, and then found a radio or something. And
did he ever tell you that story? So he never told you that story himself? No. You found out about that later?
Yeah. Well, there's a great biography done by David Alexander that really goes through his entire life. And to be honest, that was sort of, I read all of that just trying to really figure out who the guy was.
Isn't that weird that you learn more about your father from a biography than you did actually living with him for 17 years?
And it's crazy. I wish he were alive today, and I wish we were chums and buddies and we could talk about anything. However, that said, he passed away when he did. Doing this documentary and talking to people, I've learned far more about him from so many different perspectives than I think I ever would have.
Was he a loving father, like a caring, affectionate father, or was he a standoffish?
Very standoffish.
He was?
Yeah. Very standoffish. And very, very, I want to say old school, especially by today's standards. You know, did you do your homework? Yes. We'll do tomorrow night's homework so you're ahead. You know, did you do your reading? No, read more. You know, just very, I don't want to say very stern. You know, I didn't get smacked with a cane or a whip or anything, but very much into education and doing the right thing.
He wasn't coming home going, "Hey, buddy, I love you," putting his arm around you, that kind of stuff.
We had that when I was much younger, when I was in my, like 5 to 10 years, when I was a little kid.
What about your mother? Was she?
She wasn't that warm either. She wasn't like him, but, she wasn't that open her heart up and talk and share and tell me, Rod, how was your day? And
wow. Well, most of the time the mother is that way.
Yeah. She wasn't not loving, but we didn't connect either.
Mm-hmm.
So
you were almost like the outcast of the.
You asked why I might have been rebellious. I mean, not to point fingers or blame, but that might be one of the reasons. There wasn't a tremendous amount of that kind of love in the family. They loved me, I loved them, but it wasn't very warm and fuzzy.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
No. I technically have 2 half sisters. My father was previously married, but going down that road brings us into the Jerry Springer side of the family.
Why is that? Are they're just
contesting the will
something?
when he passed away and those sorts of things?
Oh, they did. So this was his first family. How long was he married to the first wife?
I don't know how many years, but I know that were we 20 years apart? We were 15 to 20 years apart.
So they're well out of his life.
Yeah.
But when he passed away, they want to get they want to get a piece of that Star Trek action, basically.
Not all of them, and it was more the ex-wife, and there were 2 daughters, and one was on one side and one was the other. It gets messy. It gets
when money's involved, right? If he were a plumber, it wouldn't have been messy at all. But when there's a bunch of money involved, there's certainly. There's a lot of interest there when someone passes away. That's got to be difficult.
I dug into it just enough to sort of get the idea and just sort of said, you know what, that was that. My mother was amazing. My mother, when the lawsuit started, all the bank accounts froze, and she did the convention circuits for years, just bringing in money to keep me in school. She didn't bring me into it. They didn't bring me into it. But she was just really amazing.
When the will was contested, they actually froze the bank accounts because
they gave just enough to live on.
Uh-huh.
And which I guess was just enough to live on. But in order to keep me in schools, and of course private schools and those sorts of things, it cost more. So
How was it ultimately resolved? Did you guys win, or was there a settlement that was involved?
Well, there was a lawsuit and then appeal, lawsuit, appeal, and eventually they won some, we won some, and it ended. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if it went to Supreme Court or anything like that.
Sounds like the lawyers probably made out better than anyone else.
They always do, don't they?
It's funny how that works
They always
out,
do.
Isn't it? Rod Roddenberry will be at Cleveland Concoction today through Sunday at the Sheridan Airport Hotel. That's at 5300 Riverside Drive. Cleveland Concoction.org is the website address. Your website, I believe, is just roddenberry.com. Is that correct?
Absolutely. See all the projects we're working on.
And I know that this documentary you made about, well, I guess it's about your father.
Called Trek Nation.
Trek Nation. When did that come out? When did you do that?
2011. It took me about 10 years to do. And when I say me, it took a lot of us a lot of time to do. I mean, there's many people I could say wouldn't have happened without them. Because it was really difficult for me to see the forest of the trees. We did about 4 years of going from convention to convention, interviewing friends, fans, and other people, and then started seeking out celebrities. And one of the things we really wanted to do is to get not just celebrities, but people from extreme sides of life, meaning so like a football player and a Playboy model, you know, and how I wanted to show the idea how Star Trek appealed to so many different kinds of people. And that was really important to me.
So there are Playboy models that are into Star Trek.
There's 2 Playboy models that we interviewed who were into Star Trek, and they told a great story about how after a shoot they would race home, and whoever got to the TV first, you know, got to watch their show. And this one always seemed to get Star Trek on. So.
Did you ever the half? You said half sisters, I think. Did you ever meet them? Have you met them?
Yeah. We did have a warm, fuzzy, Christmas time when I was in my 6, 7, and 8-year-old kind of phase.
Yeah.
Where the grandparents were there and the sisters were there and their children were there, and it just decayed. And again, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
So.
That's always, like, for instance, I didn't know my father. My mother had me, single mother, 17 years old. I never knew my father, and people always ask me, well, did that bother you? And, well, no, because I didn't know him, right. So it probably didn't bother you a whole lot, I'm guessing, because you were young. You weren't close with these people.
No. Although I can say, sorry, a little bit off topic, my mother was born in Cleveland.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What did she do before she got into acting?
That's a great question. She was in acting for a while before my father. Sorry, the answer is I don't know.
So they were dating, and he goes, "Look, I have this new show coming out. Let's put you in the pilot. Let's work this, huh?"
Well, apparently my father approached another gentleman who did Bonanza. I forgot his name at the moment, and he was looking for a female lead, and he put the two of them together. And my father, I think, did sort of a casting session, and the sparks flew, and one thing led to another.
He liked hot women. Your mom was hot back in the day.
Yes.
Nurse Chapel was she? Yeah. Oh, yeah,
it's weird for me to say, but I've heard enough other people say, and I think I can step outside myself enough to look and go like, okay, yeah, she's hot.
Oh my God, no one's come up to you and gone like, "Wow, I used to crank it out to your mom all the time when I was a kid."
No, and please don't. Please don't. If you did, I'm thrilled that you did, but please do not.
You just don't want to know about it.
Please no.
All right, Rod Roddenberry is going to be at the Cleveland Concoction today through Sunday. ClevelandConcoction.org is their website. Rod, I appreciate you coming in. Have fun over there. Don't have too many Romulan ales or whatever the hell it is that these guys are drinking over there. But thank you for coming in and telling stories about all this.
Thank you for having me.